And
Are we gonna see Wolf in the?
of course, we get this.
Okay.
This pivotal stuff. Like
we see a puff.
you know, it's interesting in the Wolf case because your friends will push you further than your enemies.
Stop scrolling, because this isn't hip-hop. Gossip, this is the kind of story that makes people suddenly stop laughing at memes and start deleting old tweets. When 50 Cent casually revealed that he stepped in to protect Lil Meech from Diddy's inner circle, it didn't sound like a flex. It sounded like a warning. No dramatic buildup, no conspiracy theatrics, just the tone of someone who's seen too much and decided not to stay quiet anymore. And suddenly, everything people laughed off for years didn't feel funny. Because when 50 Cent, a man famous for surviving industry politics like it's a combat sport, says he had to pull someone out of a situation, you don't ignore that. You listen. This isn't about beef. It's not about clout. It's about who gets protected and who gets exposed. This makes celebrity mentorship look shady. It makes Hollywood inner circles feel radioactive. And it makes people wonder how many stories never made it out. Because once you hear how this started, why 50 stepped in, and why Lil Meech was even close to that orbit in the first place, you'll realize this wasn't random. It was overdue. For years, the music and entertainment industry has sold the same dream with different packaging. Yet close to power, yet seen by legends, yet invited into rooms where decisions are made. Photos are never leaked, and careers magically level up. The unspoken promise is simple: proximity equals protection. Nobody tells you about the traps hidden inside that promise. That's why when 50 Cent revealed he stepped in to pull Lil Meech away from Diddy's inner circle, it didn't sound like gossip. It sounded like someone closing a door before something ugly could walk through it. 50 didn't announce it with drama. He didn't posture. He didn't run to the internet screaming warnings. He said it the way people do when they've already seen the ending and don't need to relive it. That tone mattered because 50 Cent is not new to this game. He's watched careers rise overnight and vanish just as fast. He's seen protégés turn into cautionary tales. He's watched people confuse access with safety and mentorship with ownership. So when he noticed Lil Meech moving closer to an orbit he clearly didn't trust, his reaction wasn't emotional. It was strategic. To understand why, you have to understand Lil Meech's position at that moment. He wasn't just a young artist trying to break in. He was momentum personified. Acting roles, industry attention, legacy attached to his name. Doors opening faster than experience could catch up. And that combination is dangerous because the industry doesn't target people who are desperate. It targets people who are ascending, people with just enough success to feel unstoppable, but not enough power to protect themselves. That's when guidance matters most, and that's also when manipulation is easiest to disguise. The idea of an inner circle sounds glamorous from the outside. Exclusive dinners, backstage access, late-night conversations that feel like mentorship. But inside those circles, power dynamics are rarely equal. The rules aren't written down, and the consequences aren't explained up front. 50 has survived long enough to recognize those patterns early. So when he saw Lil Meech drifting into that gravitational pull, alarms went off. Not publicly, internally. And here's the part people missed: 50 didn't accuse anyone of crimes. He didn't suggest scandal. He didn't imply illegal behavior. What he implied was risk of influence, risk of dependency, risk of being molded into something that benefits everyone except the person at the center. And that's often how careers get quietly rerouted. The intervention itself wasn't loud. No viral confrontation. No explosive fallout. Just distance being created intentionally. Fewer appearances. Fewer overlaps. A subtle recalibration that most fans didn't notice at first. But later, when 50 spoke on it, the internet started connecting dots. Why certain collaborations never happened. Why certain public alignments faded without explanation. Why Lil Meech's path suddenly looked more insulated. People realized something had been prevented, not exposed. And prevention doesn't trend until someone names it. When 50 finally did, Reactions split instantly. Some people applauded him, called it OG behavior, said it was rare to see someone in power actually protect younger talent instead of feeding them to the machine. They saw it as mentorship done right, quiet, firm, and decisive. Others felt uneasy. Saving him from what? Why did he need saving at all? And why was this being said now? Those questions echoed louder than any accusation, because in an industry already filled with whispers about power abuse, control, and exploitation, even a vague warning hits hard. Especially when it comes from someone who usually speaks with intention, not impulse. And here's what made it more unsettling. Nobody rushed to shut the story down. No public denials. No clarifications. No, that's not what happened statements. Just silence. And silence in situations like this isn't neutral. It's deliberate, which led people to a conclusion nobody wanted to say out loud. If this wasn't true, someone would have laughed it off. If this was exaggerated, someone would have corrected it. If this was clout chasing, someone would have challenged it. Instead, it was left alone. That's when the story stopped being about personalities and started being about systems. About how inner circles operate, about how power protects itself, about how young talent can get swallowed before they even realize what's happening. Lil Meech wasn't framed as reckless. He wasn't blamed. If anything, the story positioned him as someone who was fortunate enough to have someone step in early. Because not everyone does. For every artist who gets quietly pulled back from danger, there are others who stay too long, say yes too often, and don't realize they've lost control until the phone stops ringing. 50 understood that. And that's why his involvement mattered. He didn't wait for a scandal. He didn't wait for damage. He didn't wait for headlines. He moved before any of that could happen. And when he finally spoke on it, it wasn't to brag. It was to remind people that not all industry stories end in explosions. Some end in silence because someone made sure they did. That's what made this revelation uncomfortable. Because it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't flashy. It felt responsible. And responsibility in an industry built on spectacle always raises suspicion. This wasn't a beef. It wasn't a call-out. It was a glimpse behind the curtain, where power moves quietly and consequences are handled before they become public. And if this was only the part that surfaced casually, it raises one unavoidable question. How many stories never get told because someone stepped in just in time? And more importantly, how many didn't? Once that reveal landed, the internet didn't explode, it leaned forward. And leaning forward is more dangerous than outrage, because it means people are listening for what isn't being said. Clips of 50 Cent talking about stepping in started circulating out of context, then in context, then dissected until every pause felt intentional. The tone became the headline, calm, flat, certain, the opposite of clout-chasing energy. That alone made people uneasy, because nobody delivers a warning like that unless they believe it. Memes followed, because memes always follow. Screenshots with captions like OG saves rookie and industry lifeguard on duty. Jokes about inner circles turning into black holes. Humor tried to lighten the mood, but the jokes didn't land the same way they usually do. They felt like nervous laughter in an elevator that just stalled. The real shift came when people started connecting patterns instead of dots. Fans noticed how Lil Meech had quietly recalibrated his path. Less overlap, fewer shared rooms, a cleaner lane that suddenly looked intentional instead of coincidental. Nobody announced anything. Nobody explained anything. The change just existed, and that's when speculation grew teeth. Was it about control? About influence? About the invisible contracts that don't require signatures? People weren't accusing. They were wondering. And wondering spreads faster than certainty. But celebrity reactions added fuel without saying a word. No loud denials. No defensive posts. No quick interviews clarifying what really happened. Just distance. Strategic silence. The kind that suggests the conversation is better left untouched. Silence doesn't prove guilt, but it does confirm sensitivity, and sensitivity is enough to make the internet spiral. because if this was harmless mentorship, someone would have framed it that way. If it was a misunderstanding, someone would have laughed it off. If it was exaggeration, someone would have corrected it instead. The story stayed exactly where it landed. Unresolved, the commentary channels went into overdrive, panels, threads, slow talking. Narrators dissecting the difference between proximity and protection like it was a college course nobody signed up for. People started comparing it to pop culture cautionary tales. The fast-rising star, the powerful gatekeeper, the quiet pivot that saves a career before it costs a life. This made the Kardashians look boring. It made Hollywood mentorship look transactional. It made being chosen feel like a liability. And through it all, 50 didn't clarify. He didn't soften it. He didn't add detail to satisfy curiosity. He let the statement breathe, because breathing statements don't get misquoted as easily as panicked explanations. That restraint mattered. Because it reframed the story from exposed to experience. This wasn't a takedown. It was a reminder that the industry has layers, and the prettiest rooms often have the strictest rules. A reminder that young talent gets surrounded quickly, not always for their benefit. A reminder that access is never free. It's just billed later. This is never free. It's just billed later. People began rewatching old interviews with new ears. Old red carpet moments. Old photos that once felt celebratory now felt curated. Not sinister, just managed. And that's when the outrage crowd lost momentum, because there was nothing concrete to cancel. No smoking gun. No accusation to refute. Just a veteran saying he recognized risk and acted early. That ambiguity is kryptonite for the internet. Outrage needs villains. Cancellation needs receipts. This story offered neither. Instead, it offered prevention. And prevention doesn't fit neatly into a thumbnail. As the conversation evolved, it stopped being about one inner circle and started being about all of them. The rooms nobody live streams. The favors nobody invoices. The opportunities that come with expectations you don't learn until you've already said yes. People started sharing similar stories. Not naming names. Just nodding along. Saying things like this happens more than people think, and if you know. The comments filled with coded language. Acknowledgement without accusation. And that's when the temperature changed, because coded language means the audience believes there's more beneath the surface than they're allowed to see. Through all of it, Lil Meech stayed quiet. No victory lap. No statement thanking anyone. No defensive posture. Just work. Just distance. Just forward motion. That silence was read as maturity by some, and as confirmation by others. Either way, it reinforced the same conclusion. The pivot was intentional. And pivots don't happen without reasons. The memes slowed. The jokes faded. What remained was a low hum of suspicion aimed not at any single person, but at the system. The idea that success often comes bundled with expectations nobody explains to the people most vulnerable to them. 50 single quotes S name trended again. Not for beef, not for antics, but for something rare, restraint. He was framed as the adult in a room full of unchecked power dynamics. Not a savior, a buffer. That framing stuck. Because in an industry obsessed with loyalty, being loyal to someone's future instead of their access is revolutionary, and that's what unsettled people the most. If stepping in quietly can change outcomes this much, it begs an uncomfortable question. How many times did nobody step in? How many careers stayed in rooms they shouldn't have? How many stories ended differently because prevention never happened? The internet doesn't like questions it can't answer. It prefers conclusions. But this story refused to conclude. It lingered. Waiting for someone to overreact. Waiting for someone to deny. Waiting for someone to explain. Nobody did. And that's when the narrative hardened. Not into accusation. Into awareness. Awareness that the industry's most dangerous moments don't always come with headlines. Sometimes they arrive as invitations. As mentorship. As being welcomed into a circle you don't yet understand. And sometimes, the only thing that saves you is Someone who recognizes the pattern early and pulls you back before the cost becomes public. That's what made this part of the story heavy, not because of what was said, because of what didn't need to be. And with that realization settling in, the audience wasn't looking for the next joke anymore. They were bracing for consequences, because once awareness spreads, relationships shift, reputations recalibrate, and alliances get reconsidered quietly. And quiet consequences are the ones that last, which is why this story didn't end here. It deepened. By the time the internet stopped speculating and started settling, the story had already done its quiet damage. Not explosions, not cancellations, repositioning, the kind that changes how rooms feel when certain names come up. Because after everything 50 Cent said, and more importantly, how little he said, the industry didn't react loudly. It recalibrated, and recalibration is always more serious than outrage. People started looking at inner circles differently. Not just one, all of them. The invite-only spaces, the family talk, the mentorships that blur into dependency, the power structures that don't announce themselves but expect loyalty all the same. Suddenly, being close to power didn't look glamorous. It looked expensive. And that shift mattered for Lil Meech more than anyone else. Because instead of being framed as someone who was pulled back, he started being viewed as someone who dodged something. Not scandal, not a headline, a pattern. The narrative around him softened. He wasn't questioned. He wasn't blamed. If anything, people respected the pivot. Quiet work, fewer appearances. No need to explain himself to the internet. That silence read as discipline. And discipline is rare in an industry addicted to validation. Meanwhile, the absence of reaction from Diddy's side became its own story. Not accusations, not denials, just non-engagement, which, in a climate already suspicious of power dynamics, landed heavy. Because when nothing is said, people don't assume innocence. They assume calculation. And calculation changes perception, even when facts don't. The conversation stopped asking what happened and started asking what usually happens, because the story wasn't shocking on its own, it was familiar. To familiar veterans nodding quietly, insiders speaking in code, people saying this is how it works without naming names. And that's when the story turned from a moment into a mirror, because this wasn't just about one intervention. It was about how rarely intervention happens at all. How often young talent gets praised for access instead of protected from it. How many careers are shaped by rooms nobody explains until it's too late. 50's role in this didn't make him a hero. It made him an outlier, someone who chose to pull a person away instead of closer. Someone who valued long-term survival over short-term proximity. Someone who understood that silence can be protective, not complicit. And that's why this landed the way it did, not as gossip. As a warning, the internet eventually moved on. It always does. New scandals, new villains, new timelines to refresh. But the industry doesn't move the same way the internet does. It remembers. Relationships cooled subtly. Invitations became selective. Energy shifted in rooms that never get filmed, because when awareness spreads, people adjust behavior quietly. And here's the part nobody likes to admit: this story didn't damage anyone's reputation loudly. It altered trajectories. Lil Meech's path looked cleaner, more intentional, less chaotic. 50's credibility as a protector solidified. And the idea of inner circles being untouchable took another hit. Not enough to collapse, enough to crack, which is always how real change starts. No dramatic ending, no exposed climax, just a collective understanding that some things are better prevented than explained. And the most unsettling takeaway wasn't about who was right or wrong. It was this: the industry didn't argue with 50, it didn't challenge him, it didn't dismiss him. It adjusted. And adjustments happen when people know the truth doesn't need to be loud to be real. This wasn't closure. It was a checkpoint, a reminder that survival in entertainment isn't about being everywhere. It's about knowing when to leave a room quietly before the room decides what you owe it. And if this story felt unfinished, that's because it is, not because more details are coming, but because the consequences are still unfolding behind the scenes, away from cameras, in decisions that won't trend. Because the most dangerous moments in this industry don't come with sirens. They come with invitations. And sometimes the only thing that saves you is someone who knows when to say no for you before the price gets too high. Alright, if you're still here, don't pretend that this was just another industry rumor you let play in the background. This one hit different because it wasn't loud, it wasn't messy, and it wasn't wrapped in drama for clicks. It was quiet. And quiet stories are the ones that usually matter most. So don't just watch this and scroll like nothing landed. Smash that like button like it owes you money. Not gently, not later, right now. Because likes tell the algorithm this conversation isn't done pretending it didn't hear what it heard. Drop a comment too. Say what you really think. Was this real protection or silent damage control? Was this an OG stepping in or a system exposing itself without trying? Agree, disagree. Go all the way left or right. Just don't stay silent, because silence is how the industry stays comfortable. And if you're not subscribed yet, fix that immediately. Because this channel doesn't wait for stories to become safe, watered down, or PR approved. We break things down while they're still uncomfortable, while people are still choosing what not to say, and while the truth is still hiding between the lines. We don't chase scandals, we trace patterns. Because in this industry, the loudest stories are rarely the most important ones. The real shifts happen quietly in who gets invited, who gets protected, and who gets pulled back before things go left. So stay locked in, stay sharp, stay ahead of the narrative. This is Fame Blueprint, where power gets decoded, silence gets translated, and the blueprint behind the fame finally gets exposed. Don't blink. And the fame finally gets exposed. Don't blink.